I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, Nancy, I already clicked record. I just did. As I mentioned you on the WhatsApp, I need to do something very quick. I will come back as fast as I can. But yeah.
Well, folks, that is again, quite the documentary. It was very impactful when it originally came out about a decade ago, a little bit more than that. So I guess we could transition from, Food Inc. to Food Thought. Again, you can see how this documentary happens to tie into yesterday's topic, again, media and truth, because, we can question some of the angles that the documentary took. We could question some of the, I suppose, evident agendas that some of these huge corporations seem to have when it comes to turning a profit over things like, I don't know, we'll say playing fairly with the public when it comes to standards of health. And again, in the name of truth, we can discuss, well, it's not a coincidence that maybe standards of health vary from place to place. And if you have these multi-conglomerate corporations kind of overseeing health standards, then the truth of what is and is not healthy, of what is and is not permissible to pass off as edible, that changes. So who decides the truth of what is healthy, of what is good for you? Is it your body? Is it, again, the once upon a time, the food pyramid, or, things along these lines where you're educated into a certain sense of diet, or is it religion? So things along these lines. A lot to talk about. Again, I would like to stress the truth angle, but all right, there's more I could say, but I'll let you all speak. What was your impression of the film? Not all at once.
I guess I'll go since no one volunteers.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next segment.
Yes, let's go to the next person. Okay, since it's me again, as the next person, it honestly, I wasn't that fascinated, or I wasn't that intrigued with the fact that there's so much bad food out there, because one, I think everyone who's lived or been to outside the United States can agree that food here just tastes bad. I mean, when I first came here, the burgers, the French fries, even the milk is watery. It's bitter. It's disgusting. I stopped drinking milk since I came here. And there you go. Yes, because that's what we want to encourage, Professor Manzi. Eating peanut butter out of a jar. Okay. But yeah, coming back to that, in Saudi Arabia, we had this packaging company called Tetra Pak, and it's not even a Saudi company. It's a multinational company. You can buy some of their products here, but the milk that we bought was how milk is on the farm, because we had a friend who had a farm and he offered us cow and camel milk. So fresh, like right off the farm. And it was not exactly, because of course some of that cartoned packaged milk was processed for longevity and bacteria and whatever, but it was pretty close. And when I came here, it was like drinking bitter white water. I didn't even know that. At first I thought I got the wrong jug of milk. Like I didn't get full fat or something. Maybe I got almond milk. I was just dumbfounded that how can something so natural taste so bad. And even even the grown crops, like outside of the United States, we have corn in its natural form. Like, I don't agree with the farmer who said that it was just a useless grass before, because if you go on a farm that don't use pesticides and they don't use any genetically modified beans or whatever, a corn has actually many different colors on a single cob. I've seen purple, black, blue, orange, red, pink. It's just full of color, and it's not yellow. And when you squeeze a raw corn, whatever it is, I guess kernel, it releases like a milky white, sweet liquid. It's very fun to eat raw right off the farm actually. And here, products have been so made to look beautiful that they've lost all nutritional value. They've lost all taste to them. I mean, oranges, you can pick up a tangerine, a what is it called? The cuties and the small ones. I don't know what those are called. You can pick up one of those big ones that are only meant for juicing. They all taste the same. But when we had went to Lebanon for my dad's training, um, you could just pick an orange on the street. I mean, that's how openly they were available. And each species of orange had its own distinct flavor. You could tell that it's a different orange from the one that I ate last. So these are the things that I'm glad this documentary was made, but it was only biased to what is inside the United States. They show that, oh, it's the same bad stuff happening all over the world. No. Even in third world countries like Saudi Arabia, like Syria, like Tunisia, we have better food. Like our breakfast is a healthy salad with pita breads and hummus, and probably with some coffee, orange juice, or tea, whichever one you prefer. And then lunch and then dinner are, of course, healthier as the day ends. Less healthy, actually, because eat like, there's a saying, eat breakfast like a king, lunch as a commoner, and dinner as a peasant. So we do follow this in other countries than US, and that's why they have much less numbers in heart problems, much less number in cholesterol issues, obesity, diabetes, early onset digestion related issues. So yeah, that was my only thing against this documentary, that it was very biased.
Okay, let's check the queue. All right, I think I'm up. Yeah, no, once again, thank you for being here, participating in the conversation. Pay no attention to the sarcastic comments of one Orlando Silva in the chat. Just try to ignore him in general. Okay, so I appreciate what you're saying, Yusha. And I think there's something to that for sure. But I will say this too. I mean, okay, we can certainly explore that angle, but just some of the other aspects of the film to consider too. It's kind of like, why is it that produce and food seem to be mass produced in America, especially? Why is it that, again, if you're an independent farmer, which some people might argue sort of provided the backbone for the country when it first established itself, centuries ago. Why is it nowadays, if you're an independent farmer in the same country, you get sued by some major corporations for copyright infringement, essentially, for seeds, for using certain kinds of seeds? Like there are certain kinds of, again, corn or grain that is owned by a company, a corporation. So, considering that is in fact the case, as the documentary really went to great lengths to show, that begs the question as to, well, why is that the case here? And again, this ties back into this whole notion of why, things tend to taste the same anywhere you go. You go to your chain grocer, as y'all were saying, in one state, you go to it in a different state, and the produce is still going to weirdly taste the same. At any rate, well, here's something that we might consider as to why that's the case. profit, and the fact that if you can turn food into a business, which it's an old business, and it could somehow become something like a monopoly, where again the corporations are wealthy enough to, to quote one of the people interviewed in the documentary, sort of tip the scales of justice due to their, again, tremendous wealth. Well, that in turn determines the truth of things like how much an item costs, how much an item's value is, those items being things such as, produce, how nutritious it is for you, depending on which study gets accepted and then promoted. So things along these lines. All right. We got some exclamation marks in the queue here.
All right, so in the premise of the entire conversation about the truth and media, especially if we reflect upon yesterday's topic, and this is a form of media that we just saw, the documentary and so on, I will definitely say that the people who are involved in making this were definitely aware of the humans' emotional side of things, or the emotional judgment, or the emotional truth, as Daniel brought it up yesterday, in terms that there are three kinds of truths, and one of those is the emotional truth. And so a lot of these awareness documentaries play a big hand in terms of trying to gain sympathy towards a cause. Like, I understand it's a good cause and whatever, but you don't need to make it so emotional, because if it's true, why do you need to make the effort, right? Apart from that, my personal judgments and my personal sentiments aside, if we're just looking at the context of why is food such a problem in America and what goes on in it. So all I could see is that one event is linked to another. At least that's how they portrayed it in the media or in the documentary, that one thing led to another that caused the illness of something else, which caused this lawsuit, that caused this, that caused that, and so on and so forth. So it's more of a cause and effect kind of a thing, and that you can't just look at one thing at a time and say that, oh, this is the ultimate root cause. If we eliminate this, or if we fix this, we can move on to a better future, we can move on to a better thing. So from what I've understood, you can't put this on one industry, or you can't put this on capitalism like most people prefer doing, that it's like a blanket statement that, oh, capitalism, if we took that down, world's problems are going to be solved. I don't think that's the case. I feel like capitalism can help us drive innovation, which it did early on, where we were trying to get the world out of starvation, which caused us to have food, but it's not nutritional food anymore. It worked, the plan worked, but we couldn't anticipate how it would work. So we're kind of just battling our own inability to predict the future accurately. And then we're kind of cursing the consequences that come due to our ineffectiveness in terms of predicting the future. So because we're not able to understand that, okay, what is at stake, what is going on, who's going to get impacted, and I think in the long run we can't figure that out, and because we can't do that but we still want to do better, I feel like we keep getting interlocked in these kind of issues of, okay, industrialism, there's the farming communities complaining about one thing, the people who deal with milk are dealing with something else, and it's all these industries kind of convoluted into this one thing, where it's not even about supply and demand anymore. It's just essentially about, okay, I'm going to do what I can to make a profit so that I can keep doing what I know how to do.
All right, yeah, no, a lot of great points you raised there. And again, I want to hear from everybody first before we really get into it. But I am kind of curious. And I'll open this up to all of y'all. Where do you think the standards of health come from? Like the ones that are accepted, we'll just say nationwide. Where do they come from? God?
I'll make my my face reveal here. Hello.
They come from people. Who are those people? What do those people do for a living? Who decide the standards by which we accept something as nutritious, and we teach it in our public schools? the standards by which we judge something as, I don't know, inexpensive for what it is, the item of food that it is. The quality, you know, where do we get the graded A through Fs in our restaurants? I mean, I think if we kind of consider the source of where these evaluations come from, we can begin to think about the truth of food, or at the very least, the truth of how Americans consume food. I mean, a lot of what we understand things like health to be, you know, I think most people think of it as the truth. This is healthy for me. This is bad for me. My doctor is an expert. And, you know, his expertise, her expertise, their expertise, they come from these other sources that I was just kind of alluding to. So just something to consider when we talk about, again, truth. Because this documentary, we don't have to agree with it. I mean, obviously. But, you know, it's interesting to see just how it was presented in a way as though it were factual. You can ask these same questions towards the documentary itself. Okay, I'm sorry. Next.
Very intriguing breakdown there, Manzi. Anyways. No, so I think what you guys are kind of getting at is, like, it seems that there's some kind of bias within the documentary. I mean, I think we can all agree there's always some kind of bias on all the kinds of media that we consume. But I think something I kind of got from this, or kind of, you know, have always thought, is that this might not be due to something like capitalism. I think it's definitely a byproduct of capitalism. You think, okay, well, what's the root, and why are the companies doing what they're doing? They're cutting the cost as much as possible. Well, then you kind of ask the question, okay, well, isn't that supposed to be better for the consumer, because then that means cheaper food? Well, the documentary itself kind of even said, well, no, actually, that's not the case. They are not only controlling the cost and duping you at the cost, but they're actually cutting more costs to get their profit margin. Now, when you compare this to something that's comparative to labor has, in terms of labor and how much people are being paid in terms of minimum wage, hasn't gone up since who knows how long. But yet, if you look at the top CEOs and how much money they're making, has gone up exponentially. So that's just something that is kind of, it makes me think of. So in terms of, like, fixing the problem, you know, that's a very difficult question. You know, there's many things to take into consideration. But I think I have an issue with people who like to say, oh, well, let's get socialism out of here. Capitalism, number one. I think it's a very black and white way to look at things. I think you have to understand that capitalism is sort of like this kind of, I think who was it, the gentleman that was at last year's philosophy conference, he kind of gave, like, the conservative idea of, like, a stern father figure. That's kind of how I see this idea of capitalism, where you kind of go out and you work for your wage. Well, we also need the mother figure. That's what I think socialism in that same sense is where basically you need someone to kind of check the capitalistic nature. You need someone to check these companies and say, hey, don't overstep your bounds. But then the same federal regulatory organizations that exist are in bed with these same companies. And so that's when we start to get these issues. You don't just see it in the food industry, you literally see it in every single other industry. And that's when I have a problem with it. And that's when I say, you know what, maybe we can't blame capitalism, but maybe not capitalism, maybe it's the people. Maybe we just don't pay attention enough. And maybe we just don't pick the right politicians. And maybe we just don't know. And so it's like, okay, who do we blame it on? I don't know. I'll stop there.
Sorry, I forgot.
All right.
You can go. It's okay.
Well, no, I mean, I'm curious to hear y'all's response to that. Because again, I like what you have to say about the kind of like the synthesis or the coming together of these two economic, these ways of governing exchange, we'll just say. And I think you're right to point out that, you know, some of the concerns that were raised about the food industry in particular, you know, emphasis on the industry, you find in other industries as well. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch at all. I would say this, though, maybe unique to the food industry is, and okay, maybe not, we can talk about this, but is the tie to necessity. So food is something that you actually need. You know, you could be convinced that you actually need I don't know, a certain kind of exercise technology or, a certain kind of phone or something like that. But you actually need food to survive. And then when you push that even further, it's like, well, what kind of food is necessary? Can I eat any kind of food? And then that's when you begin to learn about things like nutrients. You begin to learn about things like again, vitamins and minerals and what your body, quote unquote, requires. And that includes, again, the degree to which one is able to eat preserved food. And how much preservatives are allowed to be put into one's food for the sake of, again, necessity. This is what justifies the consumerism. So I mean, look, I'm significantly older than y'all. I'm like almost 57 now, so I've been around for a while. It's been a long time, folks. But
You're not 57.
I mean, I can think of a time, very clearly where, like in the 80s, supermarkets especially became just absolutely pervasive. They were everywhere. Different competing supermarkets, tons of food inside of, like, all different kinds of cuisine, large aisles. It was pandemonium. It was very, impressive. And that was like such a staple. That and fast food was such a staple when it came to marketing and stuff, watching television, constantly seeing commercials for supermarkets and fast food. I bring this up because on the one hand, what allows both of those, we'll just say food-based consumerships to flourish are preservatives, are things like, again, you can taste like ointment or something on the hamburger, stuff like that. That's why, again, you could have just aisles of food that stays on there for weeks on end, and it's still quote unquote healthy. It meets these standards, and so you can tell yourself as you go to sleep at night, no, I'm feeding my children a healthy meal, or I went to the McDonald's salad menu or something like that, and they meet the requirements. So I just thought it was really interesting that part in the documentary where they said, food, fast food industry in particular, wanted to keep you from knowing how many calories were in your meal. Wanted to keep you from knowing whether or not your meal used trans fat. Like, there's a real pushback against the truth to the point where you could sort of buy the ability to bend the public understanding of something as significant as their own health, their own personal health. That's all.
Manzi, I'm not gonna go on long, but you said is there a good comparison? I mean, I don't think in terms of necessity. I think there is a comparison in terms of like free speech or speech. The reason I say that is because there's a big problem with social media now that people are essentially getting censored. Let me not even do this. Censored. Where basically now social media controls what your feed is completely. I've noticed that I've like the philosophy club, for instance. I post something, I go on my phone, I don't see it in my feed. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's dig a little deeper to that. So that what that means is that you're having once again another industries going unregulated now decides what you get to see. What's that similar to? The food industry. Oh, yeah, they don't want us to see that it's GMO? So I'm not trying to make it like some big conspiracy. I'm just saying this is the common practice, and it seems to be getting more and more common within different industries that we see. But I'll stop there because I can go on forever. You're muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry. It's been a really long day, but yeah, I completely agree with all of that. Both points, like all the points that the three of you have brought up, and I don't think labeling it as even close to a conspiracy theory is fair because it is what is happening. And if the government itself is not taking any action to prevent this kind of behavior, then I don't think there's need to say that, oh, it's a conspiracy, it's not been proven, but people feel it. No, because that is exactly how it is. I mean, we're talking about food and media right now. So how long do you think it will be that all of our social media feeds will have some form of like food advertisement in there? And second is the blatant lies that not lies, no, it is the truth that Wendy's patties are like non-frozen or whatever, but these food industries, they want to keep us engaged in these small conversations that, oh, Burger King patties are frozen, Wendy's patties are not frozen. You know, the whole Burger King and Wendy's battle that took place I think in the 90s or 80s, I can't remember when, but that's what they want to keep us engaged in. And this is the only reason why so far we had not been able to go and see actually what's going on. I mean, sure, these big companies like Tyson have prevented reporters, journalists, and anyone with any connection to media in general to go inside those chicken coops. I wouldn't call it a coop. I mean, it's a what? A receptacle, I guess you can call that. But we as individuals, as persons, we hold the right to inquire where our food is coming from. Now, this is another thing that we're not taught. We're so engaged with gun laws and all of that our attention is purposefully diverted away from these things that make us healthy. Because see, a lot of it that this documentary did not discuss is big pharma, any pharmaceutical company. See, if we're eating healthy to begin with, I'm not talking about exercise, gym, whatever, just eating healthy, there's a lot of diseases that we can prevent. Ulcer, headaches, stomach flu, stomach bugs, so many of these health related concerns that can be avoided by eating the proper food. But why would pharmaceutical companies promote consumption of healthy food when their business runs off of sick people? So if you look at it, it's just a huge net that is designed to keep its persons in. This false ideology of freedom, of access to technology, of resources. It's just a facade. I mean, I'm sorry to have the one to break the news, but we are just in this giant fish net like sardines on a hunting season. And that is why we can't get past these petty issues, whether whose patty is frozen, whose is not, who's come from a hand slaughtered, whatever. It's and that was my take on it when as I was going through the movie, I would say. The film, sorry.
I will add to that this whole conversation about the pharmaceutical industries. Like I said earlier, everything is connected in the sense that you can't blame it on one industry and say that, oh, you're the problem. If we fix you, everything else is okay. And something that came up at the end of the movie was that they were emphasizing that, okay, if you can also be part of this conversation, but if you bought stuff from the local farmers market and you urged for the change and so on. The problem is the way, infrastructurally speaking, most of our cities are designed to be food deserts. Now, we're all well aware of what a food desert is in terms that there's no healthy food outlet, affordable healthy food outlet anywhere near us within a mile. We have to have a car or some sort of a transportation where we can go and get the food, healthy food that we need. The closest thing that people have is McDonald's, is fast food that they can go drive up to, collect their food from, and get back home. That's a food desert in definition. So if we, majority of us who care about these issues, who care about being ethical, who care about everything being fair to the farmers, to the people who are the middlemen getting the food from the farmers, to the market, and so on and so forth, regardless of how much we care, the way the cities are built does not lend itself to take immediate action. It itself is a plan for like 20, 30 years where the cities have to be redesigned and redeveloped for these kind of changes to happen, or for these kind of changes to take root in a way that is equally fair to everybody. Because somebody who's in a richer neighborhood has a Trader's Joe in their neighborhood, literally, where they can easily take either public transport, or they can drive up, or they could even take a bike ride in terms of exercising to the market, get the fresh foods they need, and come back. And without even batting an eye of between the comparison of, is that tomato GMO or is that organic? They always prefer going for organic. And when I say they, the folks who are in a financial position to be able to afford these kind of things, where they don't have to worry about that few extra cents per pound. But those of us who do, who have bills to pay, who have tuition money to afford, who want to get ourselves educated, who might even have some health ailments, the first thing we look at is the price. We don't care where it's coming from, so long as it's able to feed us, fill our stomachs at night, and we're able to get to work the next morning without any issues. We just buy the stuff that's available for us readily without being able to question that, do I need to get myself in it, given that I'm already engaged with 10 million different things that need my attention? Do I really need to focus on what's going in my body? And I feel like that's how the system has kind of habilitated us in a way to not even think about that, in terms that, the groceries are the ones, because of the FDA laws and all these like food grade laws, people have put their minds at ease without actually having to look into, okay, am I buying the right thing? Because they're like, oh, if it wasn't good for me, the government would have banned it from the supermarket, so I don't need to think about it at all, because the government is the one who's responsible for this. And when you look on the flip side, government is urging the people to read the labels, to look at where it's coming from, see how is it sourced, is it GMO and not, and so on and so forth. So the message between the two, I feel like, is not being relayed properly, because there's all these middlemen who's got separate agendas of, okay, we have a patented seed, that's why we can't let this get to Congress, or the new pharmaceutical company has the exact cure for the disease caused by the bean, so we can't let that go to the Congress, and so on and so forth, you know? So in my opinion, that's how, structurally speaking, when the government system is so bifurcated and everybody's so afraid of totalitarian authority, in terms that everybody wants somebody else to be accountable for you, they really don't have a chance to get together and be like, okay, we all want the same thing. Why are we working on different agendas? Why can't we pool our resources together and work towards one cause? Because at that point, somebody has to step down, and us human beings don't like stepping down.
Okay, well said. Yeah, does anybody want to respond to Isra, or do you want to proceed down the queue and then kind of circle back? What do y'all think?
I'll kind of respond, because I mean, I'm going to say something along the same lines. I mean, I think now in the kind of environment that we're in terms of the U.S. economy, sadly, is that an important part to me was when they were talking to Walmart about the organic food. Is that essentially the guy was saying, hey, you know what? I can argue with my radical friends all I want, but I think it's going to be a better for the world if Walmart is selling organic food. And I think that kind of tells you a lot about what the most effective thing to do is, to kind of play the game, but try to play it right. Is that, yeah, maybe you're one individual, you're not going to make the biggest difference, but you buy the organic eggs. I don't know if you eat eggs. If you buy the organic solution for whatever you eat, that is essentially, you're contributing to a better cause than what already exists. And also, I think what's important is just the actual the conversation to have with other people. Like how Isra was saying, is that this isn't really a conversation, and Isra and Yusha were saying this isn't really a conversation we're having. We're having more social, cultural conversations that, and to some extent, don't really matter. These are the kind of conversations that we really should have about, what our food source, where it comes from. Is it clean? Is it unhealthy? We just aren't having that conversation with people. And to some extent, I have friends who are, of different ideological backgrounds. I try to talk to them about it, but we come to such a disagreement that sometimes I don't even want to talk to them. And if you think, okay, where is a place where people could talk? It goes back around social media. But then what happens when social media starts to control that environment? It goes back to what Yusha was saying. It's kind of a net. And so then you really start to kind of look around. You're like, man, what can I do? And I'll stop right there.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is tough to be caught in that net, but it's also it's a necessity. Thank you, folks. It's part of. All right, let's wait for Isra to give me props, then we'll move on. All right, that's everybody. Okay, yeah, but here's again the another concern that's really related to what everybody's bringing up, frankly, is again the dare we say logical or rational skepticism that Americans might have, informed Americans might have, if they begin to question again these basic truths like what it is you're putting in your body. And I mean, look, the average person doesn't, you know, okay, I'm assuming the average person, and I include myself in this, we don't necessarily understand the words written on the back of anything that we purchase to eat, especially to eat instantly. I mean, yes, okay, we have the right to know what we're consuming, so they put the chemicals on the back. But it's like if we're not informed or we're not taught to even prioritize that, if we're taught to, you know, talk about things that are more like entertainment based, you know, bread and circus based, no pun intended, it does become a bit alarming when you're like, well, again, to Orlando's point, why aren't we so clear about this? What I find equally interesting is on the other end, you have entire lifestyle and careers that are based upon informing people of their bodily health, of their nutritional value, and you know how to maximize I suppose their athleticism, you know, to be as healthy as possible as a human being can be. So it's interesting to me that we have these kind of two extremes, but at the end of the day, what exactly constitutes the truth on either end? I think in my mind, it all points back to the kind of, we'll just say, indoctrinated experts who decide, you know, first and foremost, what is and is not nutritional, what is and is not, what a human body can and can't tolerate, and, you know, what are reasonable expectations. And, you know, I know everybody's hating on capitalism, but I mean, I got to be honest with you. If you want to talk about being a fast food nation, I mean, if you're taught to trust due to, you know, slick marketing, if you're taught to trust places like McDonald's and Burger King, because you're like, well, hey, they can't serve it. It's against the law to serve something that doesn't meet certain standards. You trust the standards and you think, well, okay, it's better than nothing. At least, you know, I can cobble together some sort of a diet. I mean, I remember when McDonald's, they had a whole campaign about how you could just eat McDonald's and have, you know, a well-balanced meal every meal. Long time ago, but it was a marketing campaign. And so again, I bring that up because if you try to stretch a dollar, at the very least, you can trust that whatever's out there to be purchased has met some health standards. And if not, they'll put it in their window, you know, grade C, grade B, you know, what I call the Orlando, in terms of his essays. I'm joking, folks. No, but something to consider. All right, eager to hear your thoughts. Sounds right.
I think, yes, we definitely need more conversations regarding this, but the problem in terms of why aren't we having, like, if we need it, the logic says that if you need something, you find ways to have that need met. And because it's not happening, there are so many interferences with different people and different, I'd say, agendas in general, and there are different views of how they look at things. Because if we flip the coin a little bit and we said that, okay, let's look at why this problem began in the first place, in terms of why did we even have the need to genetically modify seeds and like cattle and raise chicken that way and so on. If we look a few decades earlier, we can see that because of World War, agriculture was pretty much gone. We didn't have the grounds fit for it. We didn't have the plants itself couldn't sustain because of all the smog and all the byproducts of what war does. And so as a result, people had to go to processed foods. People had to go to alternative ways so that the food can at least last long enough for it to go from the shelf to somebody's table and feed a family's stomach or fill their stomachs for the night. You know, so in that regard, I feel like those practices, like that kind of instilled this generational fear within the top level of people who were back then kids who thought that, oh, it's up to my shoulders to fix the world. I see this is how I can fix the world. And now the times have changed. Technologies have changed, but they're so set in their ways that it's not easy to undo what they're doing, right? So in that regard, I feel like we have to look at it from their perspective and then try and meet halfway at least. Because what I see happening our generation when we grow up and with all these like things going on, especially in the media, in terms of, oh, if you're not a vegan, you're going to hell because you're the cause of suffering for innocent animals and so on and so forth, right? Imagine us taking office in Congress. Imagine us taking office in the government and making laws that mandate that there's at least one family member in the entire United States who has to be a vegan in every like household, right? If we started passing those laws because we're thinking from our perspective that no, because those laws weren't enforced during our time, we have to fix the damage that the generation did before us. So I feel like that's going to cause another thing to rear up where we're not ready for it. We just think that no, because things are happening and it's going wrong, it's we don't like it, it's uncomfortable, so we have to fix it, even though we're not stopping for a second to understand that maybe we don't fix it. Maybe we just let it happen and naturally see where this leads or see where it organically comes out as, instead of trying to constantly interfere with the process and constantly trying to change directions or control how something ends up or how something becomes in the future.
Okay, yeah, I mean, interesting points. I mean, I will say this in response. GMOs definitely caught a lot of hate in the documentary. One could make the argument that, yeah, if it weren't for GMOs, a lot of people would have starved. It would have been really, really bad. GMOs, you could say, like, made sure that people were able to eat for a long time, for, longer durations than perhaps normally. Well, certainly than normally. So there is something to be said about that. In terms of like just letting things unfold organically, as you're suggesting, sir. I mean, the other side of it is, why leave money on the table? I mean, that's kind of this other side of the documentary here that it started to push more overtly towards the end, which is, again, you have to consider who's turning a profit from things like this, from food and just the disbursement of food and what qualifies as food. And there are certainly a lot of shows nowadays that really focus on things like the culinary lifestyle and cooking and being like a food blogger and stuff like that. Like that's a very popular thing nowadays. Like it's a trend, you might say, that's been around for at least 10 years at the very least, most recently. And so I bring that up because it's maybe perhaps not coincidental that as technology expands, the individual's ability to be not just a consumer but somebody who produces content expands almost exponentially. The consumership is going to gravitate towards things that are both necessary and also kind of like aesthetically they have this sort of style or trend to them. And so that's why I think you see a lot of shows like that lately. And you see a lot of attention paid to that. The point being is this, when you're in perhaps this kind of a capitalist environment, you're taught to be a savvy consumer, which in turn means you're taught to be a savvy business owner, perhaps. Or at the very least, a content provider. So I just think that they're really indelibly intertwined, I feel. So to say like anything, should just be allowed to happen organically, I just think that there's so many people out there who feel like, no, why not actually try to control it and yield a profit from it?
But see, that's where we're at right now. We try to control it, and we're facing the consequences of meddling with the natural processes that we didn't fully understand yet, and we still thought that no, science above all, we can conquer anything, and we ended up in a big mess in terms of not only human health being devastated as on mass scales, but also the planet's degradation, as well as the animals who live with us or coexist with us. We're not able to sustain them. We're removing more of their habitat so that we can sustain our own, for lack of a better word, greed in terms of not ever having enough. Because I was just thinking throughout this entire documentary, America is one of the only places that has size portion issues. And when I say issues, it's like size portions of a meal are so big that one person can barely finish it in one sitting. So we're overindulging ourselves. We're almost leaning towards gluttony. And now that you brought up the Food Network kind of shows where chefs are creating these extravagant foods and showcasing that how delicious is it and so on. And to me, that's just a play on a human nature or human urge. We love eating food, and you're presenting us something that we think we want, and you're making it look and sound so delicious so that we go out and either buy what you're selling us, or we try and attempt what you're trying to show us that, okay, this is how you make it. On the surface, it's just an instructional video, right? That, okay, you put the chicken in the boiling water and you put the pasta in the other pot, you make the sauce like this, and there you go, you have your dish. But in reality, that's not what you're selling me. What you're selling me is the point that you can have this too if you have the exact same ingredients that I do. And oh, what is this? This is a pasta sauce that I use. Who's gonna make the old one with scratch? You can just go to Walmart and just buy this, right? You're not selling me how to make pasta. You're selling me the pasta sauce itself. And then when you're describing the texture, you're not selling me the how it's supposed to be. You're selling me the pasta brand that I should be buying, not the knockoff brand that Walmart sells, the great value one. It's supposed to be the Prego or the one straight from Italy, or a weird name that I can't even pronounce, just so that I think that, oh, it's been handmade by some woman in a village in Italy who's been well compensated for her money, you know? So to me, it leads down to you interfere with a process that wasn't meant to be interfered with. And now all humans have ideas of all kinds. Some of us who have the power and the authority to implement our ideas go ahead and do that, and everybody else just says that, oh, they are able to do that because their idea is better. And so we're just going to stick with the program and go with what they're saying without ever questioning that, okay, what about this? There's a better way.
All right, anyone, your thoughts?
No, that was definitely very interesting. I mean, I think it's when you guys brought up I forgot who it was, but you guys brought up the idea of portion size and the problem we're having it with here in America. You hear things like that, but then you hear things like supermarkets throwing food away when they have too much of. And then they ask them, well, why can't we give it to the homeless? Oh, because it's unhealthy, it's unsanitary for them. So then you have like both sides of the fence where we're overproducing, but then we're still having a shortage for people. Does that make any sense? No. So like there is something obviously wrong with the system that we have currently. And I mean, in terms of the direction that we're going towards, I always keep saying this thing is like we sometimes tend to go the right direction, but there's always some kind of shift that puts us right back there. And what I'm saying is, there seems to be, like how Manzi was saying, in social media, even in shows where people are talking about, oh, I want a healthier lifestyle, I want to have a healthier food, I want to be a chef or whatever, and that usually tends to come from you actually doing your research and getting good quality food. But then, like how Israel mentioned, in these same YouTube videos and these same like TikTok or Instagram or whatever, you have people trying to sell you something. And that kind of acts as that counterweight where it's like, yeah, the good comes with the bad. And it's like, now it just seems like it's up to the consumer. What am I going to take from the video? This advertisement or the actual means for me to make my own lifestyle? And I think that really just depends on the person. And I don't know. I think in terms of a society, you produce a certain type of person. In my opinion, capitalistic is supposed to produce a consumer. If we're producing consumers, do we want them to be savvy, or do we want them to just take what we want them to get? I don't know. Every person's different. We don't all fall for it. So, you know, you make what you want.
Ironically,
sure that I'm sorry.
I was going to say, ironically, consumer behavior reports suggest that not everybody's different. That, you know, there are certain trends that humans will follow and certain ways to dupe humans everywhere. Subtle marketing. Yeah, you know, again, I'm just trying to tie it back to the theme of the truth. Is like, well, then what is the truth of what human beings, I suppose, need versus what they should come to expect out of certain societies or out of maybe any community? Again, who forms those truths that one accepts as beliefs when it comes to their own expectations of how they should be treated, be it from their employer, be it from their friends, their family, whatever the case may be, their government, whomever. I mean, that's kind of what this monthly theme has been about. And so with this Food Inc. documentary, what we have here is I think a pretty shining example of the way in which information can be conveyed in such a way where it's using truth itself almost as a commodity, where it's saying, hey, you think you know? Well, we're going to give you the truth, Inc. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's accidental. I think that truth itself in this particular instance was really peddled in such a way where it's like, hey, if you value real knowledge and you value your body and you suspect that the government's lying to you, so look at all these demographics we have. Now watch this, and it's going to appeal to everybody. Having said that, is the information conveyed in the documentary necessarily untrue? No. Again, I'm tying this back to the subtopic of narrative that we encountered yesterday, which is, again, the documentary is able to convey the facts in such a way where it tells something of a story that is gripping. It's like betrayal, like the way that the government's lied to you. And, you know, it's you know, redemption. And you know, there's drama about the health codes that caused E. coli, you know, killed people, unfortunately. There's the plight of the worker, the farmer, whose backs this country was built on. Like, there's all these different sides to the documentary that is intentionally designed to be provocative, to be plot driven, by design, for the sake of sharing these pieces of information, these facts, that hopefully you don't just digest, no pun intended, but you process in a way where it causes you to change your own behavior. And I mean, ladies and gentlemen, and people of the jury, that is propaganda. Or is
So
it?
I have a question. The last part of it, the last part of the documentary stated that the same people who are working with the seed company ended up in the government somehow, like through Congress, and then they moved up to EPA or FDA and so on. So would you say that's still propaganda? Would you rule it out as luck? Or would you, like, who is to be held accountable in this situation? How ethical would it be if you can say that this person is responsible, or do you curse the company who planted those people, pun intended, or would you say that no, it's just the way things are? They were the most knowledgeable in the industry, so it just made sense to have them on the government side of things, even though they're the ones who are blocking the bills, or they're the ones who are encouraging certain bills by lobbying or by propagating different things or different angles of the same situation. So who would you hold accountable in the whole mess of things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, you know, those points are mutually exclusive. I mean, I think it's a lot of those things all at once combined. Yeah, they're qualified to serve in their positions, but also, I mean, ought they be held accountable? Yes, but who's to hold them accountable? I think if nothing else, it just, it exhibits this sadly not transparent enough point that, again, things like the truth of consumerism in any form or fashion, in this case, food, the facts and figures can be obfuscated. People can avoid accountability for if the facts are presented in a certain way. I mean, again, we kind of saw this on a micro scale where the farmers were like, we couldn't afford to, fight this. Like, that's just what it is. So, I mean, and this came up yesterday too. Does justice and truth necessarily coincide at all times? I think that guy, Kid Gibbs, brought it up. And, not necessarily, depending on how you spin it and depending on how you can financially enforce it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll stop there. Well, because, okay, just to also respond to your question, because I do think that if I had to guess, Orlando's response, I would say that he would say, well, it has to do with the way society is structured. Like if the economic infrastructure of a society is such, as it maybe is here in America, we could argue, well, then in that case, yeah, the accountability is more easily or readily excused because it's not personal, it's just business. You know what I mean?
That's not my response. My response.
Yeah, so he texted it to me. I read it verbatim.
It concedes. I guess it kind of concedes to what you're saying. I think when it comes to those kinds of deals, concedes, like as in this, and accepts that what you're saying is true. Am I using that word wrong? I might be using it wrong.
No, as in it's a pun, like concede.
Oh, no. Okay. Hi guys. Have a good night. I'm leaving.
No, that was brilliant.
What I was gonna say is, a saying that comes to mind for me is this person best for business? I think that's how they think about it. I think it's like, okay, yes, sure, he's most knowledgeable, but I'm sure there's other people who are just as qualified as well. Conflict of interest, that is also a saying that's very popular, and it's the most important. These people are appointed, they are not elected. They are appointed by people who they have probably been, the person who appointed them probably were funded by them. So it's like, you shake, you hold me there, I'll hold you here, so it's like, that's so sketchy. And you can rationalize it. You can say it looks like this from here, but it looks like that from there. But ultimately, when you appoint someone and they're mostly in your favor in terms of money, and then you're mostly in their favor in terms of regulatory laws, I mean, if the shoe fits, it's corruption. And I think it's just that simple. I think it's what it is.
If the issue fits.
Oh, no. I missed that one. I should have got
that. It's not the sole one you missed.
It's all recorded too, sadly. It's all recorded going on YouTube, so it's there for the record forever.
Well, all right. Look, anything else? We didn't really talk much about the whole E. coli aspect of it. I guess Isra was rather cold-hearted about it, said it was playing to our emotions. but that's something else to consider too, is, again, who sets the standards by which we judge something as, again, safe, we'll just say, like safe to be consumed. That goes for everything from, the paint you put on children's toys to, what you put in baby food, stuff like that. That is another big part of it. There's a lot of money in precaution. There's a lot of money in safety. It seemed like, at least relative to this particular documentary, and I'll just throw this out there, that'll be the last thing I throw out for consideration, is that, okay, cool, somebody wants to talk. Well, it's just this to consider. I think of something like the physical fitness tests that I used to have to take when I was younger. I don't know if they're still around. I have no idea. I assume not, but who knows? Maybe they are. At any rate, the reason like children were subjected to take these things was because again there was a consensus out there. Oh, going to be living soon. Yeah. back from the dead.
He's
All right, I'll wrap it up here. Okay,
No,
I'll just
no,
gonna make
no,
no, it's gonna be some long analogy. I'll just suffice it to say this, that when it comes to things like the health standards, just remember that these are businesses that are deciding people's lives, and if these are businesses that operate on a very massive scale, it's really easy to overlook the individual. That's all. Okay. What are we gonna say? Orlando, keep on living. Let me hear it.
Sorry. The point that I was going to bring up was the fact that they showed the Oprah lawsuit in a very brief moment, but they kept going into how these big companies and the soybeans and whatnot. I mean, they focused on one issue. Sure, they had a very short amount of time. They had like 90 minutes for it, granted, but they should have gone more into the true. I guess that gives us to talk about it, that truth is hidden in the media or hidden from the media. That growing up, one, it never came on the channels that we had at home, that Oprah has been sued by a food company, like a beef patty company, for some reason. And she didn't even say anything slanderous. She just said that it's bad. I mean, if I don't like something, I'm gonna say it's bad. So on those terms, it was so strictly regulated that not even acts of constitution where freedom of speech and freedom of expression, even those cannot protect a person, especially someone. I mean, Oprah was a very high profile person even in 2008. But what about that poor farmer who refused to grow soybeans? One, two, his own soybeans were constantly being sabotaged by these by the company. I forgot its name, what it was called, the soybean owner or whatever. And three, when he did find a way to make his own living off of those soybeans and come out of that constant cycle of being in debt, they they push him into a lawsuit for which it was easier for him to pay the fine and be falsely charged with guilt and those charges, accusations, rather than to win that charge. And how sad it is that our rights of freedom secured by the Constitution are being challenged so blatantly, and here we are not giving an F about it. So my point being that if these companies control so much, even on the media, where freedom of speech is at its pinnacle, the do we not think that it's in this specific realm, it's out of it's out of consumerism and being pushed into a very tight, I don't want to use a communist, but that is the only term that comes to mind. Is it not because of these companies that we're slowly getting accustomed to communism, not in the true sense of the word, but in a sense that if they can control so much, even our freedom, even the rights that are secured by the Constitution. Yes, thank you, Orlando. Oligarchy. Thank you. And yet again, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Why? Because it's the government who gave them this power. Why? Because we as people fail to realize that, hey, if we just stop buying their product, it's their end, because it is us who is funding them. And I have this conversation a lot, that I hear people say that, oh, Adidas use plastics in their products and whatnot, and you know they're bad and blah blah blah. They want to talk bad about someone, but when it comes to taking action, they don't want to be a part of the team that takes action. I just simply tell them that, hey, if you don't like Adidas products, don't buy them. It's as simple as that. If 10 people don't buy it, it's not gonna make a difference. If 1,000 don't buy it, it's not. It maybe made a small dent, but if enough people around the planet stop buying Adidas products, they will be forced to change their rules and regulations, because our generation is the one that again changed Sonic, the movies, entire graphics. Why? Because we didn't like how the graphic designer made his teeth. So we pressured an entire production company to remake a movie that was 100% CGI, by the way, just because we did not like the character's teeth. Do you not think we have the power to stop these big pharma, FDA, what is it, the other food companies, the soybean company, the meat processing companies and all that? So if we just think about if we just think about what we can do as a bigger group, I think there's so much more we can accomplish.
No, I think those are great points. I mean, and good examples too, recent examples. We'll welcome Professor Lucas Ulrich into the room. He's teaching on campus at Richland right now in the spring.
Hello.
You got to get out of here? You sure? All right, take it easy, Orlando.
Don't stop living.
He's gonna live his life.
Well, I mean, I wanted to make this point that just to push back a little bit, you know, people like or groups like Monsanto, which again is like the soybean bully, I suppose. You know, you can make these comparisons to like, you know, a movie or something like that, or a clothing line. But the thing about food is that it's necessary. Like in order for McDonald's and Burger King to like meet their health quotas, they need things like soybean, and they need them at a massive amount, like everywhere, all across the nation, where hundreds of millions of dollars are tied into people who consume those products because they're working 2 or 3 jobs and they don't have time to cook or shop. So they depend on these products, and those products depend on these huge conglomerates that kind of, they control the product. They have a monopoly on corn. I mean, that point in the documentary where it said, well, corn is in absolutely everything. I mean, that's a big statement because it's a big country. We got a lot of different foods we eat. And if corn is only owned by like a few huge conglomerates, I mean, yeah, to what Orlando said, something of a weird oligarchy, not a governmental oligarchy, but an economic one. All right, I see we got the chat blowing up here. Let's take a look.
No, we don't. There's nothing important in there. I will push back on what you just said regarding the comparison between Sonic animation and not buying Nike shoes. On the surface, they may look like the same thing because we're both, yes.
It's Nike, without an E. It's Nike.
Nike. Whatever. No more
It's
Mr.
Nike.
Nicey guy.
No, actually, it is Nike. Because it is from this country. I had this discussion with an American, and it's like, this is an American thing. It's a Nike, Nike. Just, I mean, I don't think it's relevant, but it's out there.
We can get to it later.
It's an after chat. But the pushback on Yusha's comparison is that you're comparing apples and oranges. On the surface, they both look the same, or because it's a consumer-related issue, we can say that, yeah, if we can have them change the graphics, we can have them change their practices for business. But the challenge lies is that the pushback on the Sonic animation happened within the 21st century with 21st century technologies and with 21st century animation techniques, with the people who were responsible or had the authority and power to change the animation before the movie was released. There are two parts to this point, but Nike pushback would be that they've been in practice for about like over, I believe, 20 or 30 years. They have certain set industry standards, and they have certain set they're in fact pioneers of a couple of standards in the shoemaking realm and so on. So it's much harder for them to change something based on what consumers are telling them to, versus an animation that has to happen on a within the same realm of technology and within the same context of, okay, what do people want, right? So they have an easier time meeting the needs right then and there, versus Nike, who has to change a dozen different protocols, a dozen different processes for them to be able to meet what the consumer is asking them to do right now. On the second hand, or the other side of this conversation would be that it boils down to the consumer's ability or the consumer's psyche in terms of being able to understand that I'm the one in control. On the surface, yes, we can say that the money power lies with the customers, or the money buying power lies with the people who are doing businesses with such organizations. But the reality is the risks of failure are far offset between the two comparisons, especially because when a movie is a fail, it's a fail forever. It's never going to make that money back, and then it's more of a, you put money up front before the movie is released, and then you make it after the movie is on Netflix or anywhere else, right? The return comes in much later. So they couldn't risk not listening to the consumer at that point. But the bigger companies, they have the luxury of being able to ignore what the people want and still go through the processes and still be making the profits. So they're not the ones in fear of, oh, I'm going to lose money out on this. They have a larger threshold of, okay, they have a better buffer in terms of, if we lose this season, we'll come up with something on Christmas or on Black Friday, and we'll make that loss up later on in the year. Versus a movie, they can't do that. Once it's released, they can't change it to make it better. That's a pushback. That's a big pushback, but that's a pushback.
But a very tiny person.
Well, I'll just say that I'm just gonna say that I see where you're coming from, and you're going into the processes of it. If you look at the comment of Professor Ulrich, he mentioned interest groups, which is the proper term for how I wanted to explain it, right? So if we can make these interest groups, even on a simple platform like Facebook or whatever, and yeah, I understand that changing graphics is much easier than changing, say, soybeans, but it's still not as difficult to say that, hey, we as a company were wrong about us enforcing our patent on day-to-day farmers, and we take this back. You can grow whichever soybean you want. Just know that ours lives longer. There's an entire thing to that apology that they can come up with. And if, as I mentioned in the comment again, I'll just read it out, that I agree with you on that. My point was that when we create these interest groups for mundane issues, why can we not make these groups to make our foods healthier? Now, you're going into the processes of it. I'm looking at the overall general picture of it, that, hey, if, okay, for example, we do manage to create an interest group. We do offer a lot of losses to the company, right? By not buying their product. They're going to try and threaten us with a lawsuit. Second, defamation. Third, there's a lot of things that go with it. But with enough resistance and retaliation, just like how the African Americans fought for their freedom, and the bus rides and the sit-ins and the schools and everything. I'm not saying that these two topics are comparable. One is definitely far worse than the other. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if we implement the same processes to it, that, hey, okay, you wanna sue us, come at us. We're at like 3 million people right now. How many people is this company gonna sue? 1. 2, with enough pushback and losses to the company, eventually they will have to turn off these I don't have the proper term for it, but these bad process of imposing their own property, which does not belong to them. Soybeans belong to the nature. It's no one's property. And with that, I think with enough force, enough manpower, enough people not buying their products, giving them billions of dollars in losses, that is what we can do. And a similar thing did happen. You guys probably know Nestle, right? Company. They have a powder milk called Nido. I don't know if you guys ever had it or not. It's just evaporated powder milk. It's called Nido. You can buy it at your local Walmart. And a while back, their Denmark head office had made fun of the Muslims' prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. With enough pushback, the Denmark HQ had to shut down. Why? Because no one was buying their product in all of Middle East. So if we implement the same theories, which have been proven successful in the past, why can we not stop this false pretense of that, hey, our soybean is the best, you know, it's natural and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have any, all the bad stuff. But in actuality, it's worse than the rotten ones.
Mhm. I do want to say this. I agree with you, Yusha, and in the extent that, yeah, if we work together, we could be able to start like making some movement or changes in that area. I don't know exactly what you have been talking. I'm just here chiming in, kind of like as an intruder. There's a thing like there are distinctions. There has been some instances, for example, in Chile, that people really combine their efforts to kind of like address an issue that is happening from a bigger corporation or just the governance. But I think that the main difference here is like, for example, at least in the case that you're mentioning, the image that was attacked is very dear, basically by everyone. Again, I don't like absolutes, but the big majority of people like have the image of Muhammad like very dearly. So like it is a message. It is like an image that really will move people. But in this situation, let's just kind of like reframe it in this country. Just as it is stated right now, is very much divided. You have those who support this kind of like initiative and those who are not. And if you have the country so divided and all of them have different ideas, it is in practicality so much harder. And I know that there are some corporations that they purposely treat treat this in English. I don't know. Like they say like we're gonna sue you, and they will sue people for like immense amount of money, even without having anything really to back up their word. But the thing is like just the process itself is so costly that let's say that whoever was being sued managed to go out of it without having to be guilty of it. Like the whole process is so expensive for him that he would think twice before doing it again. And the same goes with other people. And these people have enough money to kind of like do this fighting where most people don't. And I agree that a way to solve it is kind of like just having everybody band together. But I mean, the nature of the beast right now in this country is kind of like fighting against what I think is a good ideal. Um, yeah.
Okay, I like that point of view. Both of you have made the same baseline or the premise of your argument in terms that, yes, people came together. The key factor there of them coming together is their basic understanding of, okay, the masses understood that XYZ was wrong, and that's why we have to band together to course correct. But the problem with America, especially in food industry, because of the movie today, or the context of today's movie, is that the food industry has been so bifurcated in terms that knowledge isn't passed on as freely, or information isn't as freely available in terms of what goes on in ingredients, what happens with the process, how is it actually processed, so on and so forth. That information is only available to the few who either worked on the process or those who have been affected by it in one way, shape, or form. But the masses really don't care because they don't understand what went with it. And so it's harder to get those people on board with us or get on the same page as everybody else because the masses don't understand the baseline of the problem. Like collectively, they don't understand that this is something we have to move against, versus the examples that both Yusha and Ferdinando presented, where the masses understood that, yes, we have to band together to fight against an injustice, or we have to band together to fight against XYZ, you know? So the comparison there, like the conversation might be more fruitful if we had, like Orlando was saying earlier, that if we could remove the barriers and we can get more people on the same page. But unfortunately, for that to happen, we have to do a lot of legwork in terms of educating people, and we have to make sure that there's nothing standing in the way of that education, in terms that there aren't any privileges, there aren't any propagandas going on, there aren't any one-sided conversations going on, that this is constantly always bad and this is constantly always good, and because you're a good person you should align yourself with me because I'm constantly advocating for good, you know? Like, give the black and white, don't be so black and white, look at the gray area as well, and then make up your mind.
Yeah, the other area, and I'm very much assuming at this point that you also talk about it, is the whole media influence. The fact that they don't expose this as much as they should also kind of like portray the lack of awareness that some people may have, because if you just post the news as it should be and everyone is kind of like having the same view, I mean, it is easier for us to have a common understanding, because you may have those radicals based on the media words, not mine, that is just kind of like, you know what, this is insane. Like, I saw what they do to the pigs and the chickens. I don't want that. And they start like going all this ballistic into these communities and these companies. Sorry. And the other people who are may not be aware of these situations, like they grew up eating chicken and pig. It's like, well, I mean, this has been even before I was born. So what is bad about it? But they haven't seen it. They haven't lived it or experienced it. So it's hard for them to really empathize with the whole movement and understand why so much the outrage if the information is not being provided to them. So, and again, that's in a sense part of the job that the companies are doing. It's like, hey, we make money out of it. We give you money, and you don't show this. It makes harder, and it in some sense work as some sort of manipulation of the whole communities, ensuring the power, of course. But yeah, I know. I think Yusha wants to say something.
Yes, with the onslaught of media control, especially when it comes to this kind of sensitive issues, and which ones that relate to these big multinational companies, is just the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, they do hold the power over suing us for hundreds of millions of dollars, and for which the legal fees itself is a killer, right? Like in the documentary we watched, he said that he hadn't been to court a single day, yet he had to pay over, I think, 250,000 or something like that for legal fees. So this, I think it's a very ingenious design that these companies have when it comes to protecting themselves behind whether it be social media, finance, or even the government itself. Because we, as was mentioned at the beginning of today's meeting, that we inherently assume that the government is always doing what is in our favor. But if you look at the public school lunches, Ferdinando, you would know about this as well, that the lunches that are served in South Dallas schools are so unhealthy. I mean, you and I have been to events where we've seen it firsthand. And when you go to schools like Lake Highlands or, something like that in Uptown Dallas, they're literally fed with a silver spoon, to say. But yes, it's right. And that is what I'm saying, that we've been conditioned that way, to think that, oh, the government, our savior, please protect us, and blah blah blah. And to answer to Professor Ulrich's comment, yes, we are focusing on social media a lot because this this month's theme is the truth and social media. So yesterday's meeting was about the same thing, truth and social media, and that's why we're focusing on social media a lot.
Yeah, I do want to add something here. I agree, but also the whole concept of government, it really depends on your situation in it in itself. For example, someone from the Black community may have a different perception of what if the government is with them or not. They're more likely will feel like it is not. Whether that matters or not at the end is kind of like irrelevant because I mean they hold significant less power than those who are in those positions. But the matter is like I do think that it's part of the issue here, and not necessarily directly, but yeah, like you have people who are not experiencing it and they're kind of like being told that this is not happening, and all you have is some people whose words are not as trustworthy as the government. Then yes, it kind of like plays into the same imaginary, even though it is not the same topic in itself. You were also bringing up the whole topic of fear with these threads. I think, if I'm not mistaken, while doing some of educating myself in this topic, which I happened to do it like a couple of months ago, I remember that, and I don't know if that's something that happened when I was not looking at the documentary because I wasn't able to watch the whole thing. Um, there are ways that we can fight this thing, like legally do not allow these companies to just sue just for the sake of suing, that they have to make some huge like proof before like bringing all this to the whole legally aspect to begin with. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, most states, if not the big majority of them, their regulations are so lenient in this matter that it's almost laughable, and that's why companies are so able to keep like just doing this for sport, which is just allowing them to continue doing their dirty job as if there's nothing really happening. So that could be one way to fight it. Kind of like, I mean, if you can bring this to a matter where people can see it, regardless of of your political standpoint, you can always say, like, listen, like, this could benefit us all. I mean, you never know who's going to be the president next term, so let's cover our asses in this case. This will be blip, of course, in the recording version in YouTube. It will be completely blip. Um, I think there is something there that we can work on as
Well,
a community.
that leniency goes both ways because not too long ago I had a client in. He wanted to sue Apple for their security when they first came out with the face recognition unlock thing. He wanted to sue Apple as an individual because his twin brother, his identical twin brother, was able to unlock his phone. So when we did do that, instead of challenging us or offering us any kind of pushback, they just said that, oh, hey, there's this amount of money that I cannot disclose. Here's this amount of money, and drop the case, for which he was happy with, and you know, the case was dropped. There, nothing came out of it. So it is that does happen a lot, especially in law, that a company will just, instead of fighting it, they'll just pay you. It's called a settlement. They'll just have it settled even before anything reaches the courtroom. So it is very lenient. You're right. I agree with you on that.
Okay, so I think that pretty much like summer up the
I
whole
think we're
event.
done
I know
here.
Mansi, yeah, I know Mansi wants to speak, but I mean, we run out of time. Not just kidding. You're next.
Well, no, I mean, honestly, yeah, I just wanted to kind of wrap things up here. I think we've gone well over an hour for this conversation. I thought it was
3.5
really,
hours.
it was a it was a fruitful conversation, no pun intended. Um,
It was well rooted.
I was waiting for the applause to stop. Okay,
A
so
lot of beef going on. Sorry, I had to say it. I have to say it.
thank you, Luke, for the laughter. Somebody had to laugh. Again, I don't know the difference between fake laughter and real laughter. It's really easy to fake it online, so just fake it. Okay.
I'm laughing on the inside. On my luck that I got stuck like this. It's just the laughter of disbelief.
Again, I'll take it. Okay. So again, we're not going to meet next week because of spring break. So it's going to be about 2 weeks until the Philosophy Club meets again. This is the second of 3 film installments. So again, we did one in February. This is March, and then we have one coming up in April. And again, the April one will be it'll be a series of vignettes. So it's only a total of like 26 minutes, the film itself. But
I'm looking forward to it. So exciting.
It's the length of one audition, right, Fernando?
Yes, it is. But yeah, this is the thing. Like, well, I'm not gonna spoil it. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so look forward to that. Again, next month's theme is society. So we began with reality, and then truth, which we concluded tonight. Society, and then the last couple of weeks will be art. So the film will be vignettes will be about society. They're interstices, which is to say they're designed to capture moments in human relationships and interactions that typically aren't the content or featured moments of films. So it's trying to like capture the parts of life that make us human that again don't seem necessarily compelling. They're kind of the in-betweens, the interstitials, the interstices from one moment to the next. All right, at any rate, yeah, looking forward to starting a whole new theme a week from next in Philosophy Club. And be on the lookout for the call for submissions for the Dallas College Philosophy Undergraduate Student Conference, Spring 2021. Woot woot. Again, we're going to have more of a formal announcement of this, but tell your friends, anybody who's studying anywhere in the States, even the country, even internationally, happy to take their application. Okay.
I guess before we leave, hey Fernando, it's off topic. I'm sorry, but Fernando, can you please check my permissions for the Philosophy Club? I think there might have been mix-up, and I noticed that I don't have the permissions that I had previously. So I understand that you want to restrict students from kicking each other out and whatnot, but can you please take a look at that when you have time?
No, that's no accident. I'm actually restricting all of your permissions. So I will be in charge of everything, and you guys vote for me.
Got it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming, Luke.
That's what y'all get. That's what y'all get for messing with Professor Manzi. He's finally getting his claws out.
Oh no! This was about me calling you that thing on Monday, right?
We're on record still, just for the record.
Oh shit! Let me. Can we stop recording, please?
Can you repeat that word again?
Stop the recording first.
All right. Thanks for coming to the film series discussion. This was fun with the PH. We'll be back again in the second week of April, the second Wednesday of April. We'll be back with a series of vignettes called We Don't Know.
I keep thinking you keep calling it beignets for some reason. Maybe because I'm hungry or really want a beignet. It sounds like beignets, honestly.
I would love a beignet. Vignette.
There's this really cool restaurant thing in Galleria. They have the best beignet. That's the closest I've had since New Orleans.
Sounds good.
Hey, Professor Manzi, can you do the maniacal laugh from Monday that you were doing? Isra wanted to hear it.
It's got to be organic. It's just
why?
I can't.
Sorry, Isra. I tried.
It comes from deep inside of me. It happens when it happens.
What was your thought process like? Let's walk you through this. I'm sure I can have you do it.
Where did Fernando go? He's got to cancel this recording.
I think he got frozen or something.
Cut the recording, Fernando. I don't want this on record again.
Again? What do you mean?
Can we stop recording now?
Yes, I thought. I mean, my internet went off for a moment, so I wasn't completely sure if I stopped recording or not. But no one of you can stop recording? I can.
I just wanted to run it by